would help you avoid that. And they said, well, we just need clean water. Everyone is sick all the time, dysentery, and they did not have a clean water source. So we were able to bring in some engineering capability and establish some water systems, and that led to the further development of that community and avoided further deforestation. That's just an example.
That's great. I'm going to go off track a little bit, just to go back to the fear thing, because I think it leads to dialogue and education. This is a personal thought that's just come to mind. I'm thinking of like arachnophobia or something like that. This, biophobia. I don't expect somebody to shriek when they go near a tree, though I know there are people that probably do that, unfortunately. But how do we define then that fear of, is it just?
Well, I mean, I'll start. I mean, I deal a lot with industry and carbon credits and that type of world, and I'm talking about nature being a solution. And they're just not used to thinking of nature as a solution to their problems. Historically, endangered species, wetlands have always been a problem for industry. And to all of a sudden reach out and say, ecology, you're my friend. I mean, that's a big step. It's a big transition. And I think it's kind of almost shame on us that we haven't done a better job of explaining, on one hand, to well-educated people how this fits in. And I think in a way it's almost more innate knowledge than it is. I think our education system takes us away from this, unfortunately, rather than instills it. I'm in the engineering school at Rice University, and those engineers don't know anything about ecology. Earth is as far. In fact, I'm trying to get the dean to do nature-based engineering as a specialty, and they're intrigued. But it's like nature, engineering, nature, and they need to be merged. And I think that's biomimicry. I think that's the circular economy, and I think that's where we're headed in my most optimistic day.
So would you say then the fears, you can answer this if you don't mind, is the fear then of just a simple lack of knowledge of the benefits of nature?
I think before the lack of knowledge of the benefits comes to an unclear picture of the future that we want. And so we're so working so hard fighting our current fights, whatever they are, water or politics or electricity, and so on and so on. And before modern civilization, we had these indigenous cultures who lived for thousands of years, hundreds and thousands of years. People would expect life to continue to be healthy. And in our lifetime, the world has changed. In my lifetime, we have 3 times more people on the planet. And so we're now fighting over land and fighting over water in ways that never happened. And it feels like all of life is sort of a war against something. And so reframing what we're expecting out of life with nature, we can. Because in the long run, we're not, I don't know of anyone who doesn't love going into nature, who doesn't revive himself in nature. But bringing that back into our consciousness, that's what we expect for our kids, is to have a healthy nature, as well as healthy cities. So it's that expectation which then overcomes the fear.
I'll elaborate a little bit I think it depends on who we're talking about. Culturally, I think we have many different ways in which we experience nature. Nature may be a place for some people to just have social gathering. It isn't a place to hike and to explore and to be alone. It's a place for coming together. For other people, nature may be something you merely look at out your window because you become so accustomed to creature comforts that nature isn't a place you really feel you have the skill set to recreate. Not that you don't have the interest, but you've never been given the opportunities to recreate or access it in other ways. And for others, it literally is, the playground that they grew up in, and it was, you got kicked outside. We didn't have screens, right? We were all feral kids. That's kind of my generation. So I think we have to be mindful of who we're talking about, also the age of the individual, and all the different ways in which nature exists. We have urban nature. Nature that emerges from the crack in a sidewalk is just as important to, to preserve and admire and to see as wild nature, and the ways in which we've discovered that we can use nature. I work a lot with youth, girls specifically K through 12, and we are trying to teach them about nature as mentor because we are creating the conditions for these girls to be in mentoring relationships with one another. And one of the ways in which we create the conditions by which they may experience nature to feel safe and seen and supported in their explorations is by giving them multiple visits to nature. One visit in nature might be really inspirational, but we also know that the more time spent over time, not only does it start to calm any sense of fear that you may have, but it also starts to give you the ability to expand and open up kind of what you see, what you understand, that kind of fostering and stewardship sensibility. It does miracles in terms of growing relationships with one another. So I would say it's a process. There's not one way to experience it, and we have to kind of set conditions based on who it is.
we're always doing our duck and cover in our elementary school. My point is, we were worried about just surviving another month or another year. And the idea of surviving 1,000 years was totally off the table. Well, it's our job. And I think none of the 6 of us or anyone in the audience it can allow ourselves the indifference to say it's not my job. It is our job to talk now about that we need humanity to flourish for another 1,000 or million years. And it's our job to make that happen. That's part of why they made us gray-hairs. I'm through worrying about my career, about my kids. They're grown, they're prosperous. And now it's our job to keep that vision of the future, because that future can only happen with a circular economy. But as long as our focus is near term, like it is when I was a kid, when I was a young adult in my 20s and my 40s, it was okay to say it's someone else's job. But guys, it's our job to make sure that people are talking about humanity flourishing for a long time to come.
We've only got 5 or so minutes left before questions, and Steve, you've been a little quiet tonight up here, so what do you got to say?
Well, I'm just thinking, curious now with AI, it'd be interesting to see what happened if we took away all the subsidies and we started looking at true cost of products and what an adjustment that would be. And I think about, since 1950, our food has gotten cheaper and our health costs have gotten more, and there are direct lines that have crossed. And the first time in civilization, we have malnutrition and obesity in the same body. How, coming back to nature-based, our food systems and how we're treating our soils is one of the major issues that we need to deal with.
I think one of the most interesting things is we have in front of us, I think, an incredible period of creativity. And I think we have this opportunity to redefine so many things that were never on the table, as far as I could tell, in the earlier part of my career. And I think that on the one hand, we've got tremendous challenges, and I think we've got to rewire this society, this economy. The circular economy, I do think, is much more resilient. And again, being practical on the Texas coast, every now and then a hurricane comes through and exposes that certainly our building concepts are not resilient. We have the opportunity when these events happen, and they will happen more and more and more, to redesign in a better way, and a better way of thinking, because the destruction on the one hand is an opportunity on the other. And I think nature is creative. Nature takes advantage of opportunity, and that's the type of thinking we've got to have. So that's part of my nature-based or nature-derived type of thinking.
That's a perfect jumping off point for me, because all of that creativity you see in nature expressed as diversity is really just redundant, diverse solution sets. You think about any challenge that you can name in nature, and it's been solved like countless ways. There are so many ways to come up with a solution for shedding water, for regulating temperature, for deterring collision, as with the Ornalex system. So all of these different solution sets are highly creatively expressed in nature. And when we look at where a lot of our creative energies come from, I'm experiencing it with youth. There is a program called the Biomimicry Design Youth Challenge. It's through the Biomimicry Institute. I wish it was made available in every school across the country. Give students an opportunity to solve a challenge, and they don't know what they don't know. And so they come up with like the most fantastical kinds of, solutions that many, companies are paying attention to, because they're really onto something. They've really thought about something in a way that hasn't been stifled by looking to our cleverness, the designs that we've made. It's based on all these other things that they're coming across because they were curious enough to ask the questions and think about things in unique and creative ways. Yesterday, I did a studio review for a first-year architecture studio at the School of Architecture in Austin. And they used AI to help them kind of generate patterns in nature. And from there, they were creating furniture systems for both humans and insects. part of their homework was to just immerse themselves in understanding the 24-hour cycle of like countless different insects, which was just a joy in and of itself to watch. And each of them, not only did they come up with all of these unique patterns, which they didn't understand at all, because all of these patterns in nature came into being because they were trying to solve some functional need, and typically multiple. Any solution that you see in nature is actually an expression of multiple integrated solutions in the most elegant way that you can imagine. And so these students are taking these patterns which they don't understand, and sometimes they're very topically applied but being expressed in these beautiful designs, and just having an opportunity to help them understand that there's something more going on with that pattern, and that there was a richer opportunity that they could still investigate, I think is going to kind of change the course for many of their design careers as they continue to study. Like, these are conversations that people don't soon forget, because they've just been given a new skill. So.
Well, thank you so much. I'm actually going to start to turn to the audience, if that's okay. We have just a few minutes left in our segment. I'm wondering if anybody has any questions or comments. You're welcome to stand up and get mine at the mic. Oh, there we go, great, perfect, unless you're leaving. Wonderful, please go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Anya. First of all, thank you so much. It's been such an amazing session, and I really wish that next year each of your areas of expertise is broken down into a separate session, because there's just really so much inspiration and so much information, and I want to stay here all day listening to y'all. My question is about education. I run a community garden at a medical school, and I'm always flabbergasted by how little those soon-to-be doctors understand about nature. And we are nature, and they are completely disconnected from nature. So when they come to a community garden, they're kind of like little babies looking at me, and I make all of them smell compost. I pick up finished compost, and I explain to them that this is where life comes from. Smell this smells like life. And most of them have never even heard about compost. I also have some high school students who come through the garden touring it just because their teachers thought it was something interesting to do. And very few of them have ever heard about composting. And, you know, talking about biomimicry, compost decay is like the most fundamental thing of life. There's no life if there's no decay. But my question is about, what can we do to change this? Like, where do we go to get our doctors to learn about nature, to get our children to learn about nature? What can I do as a parent to get my kid exposed to nature?
Right? If I really want to understand who you are and have a relationship with you, I have to start to ask you questions. I have to understand kind of what makes you tick. You know, why do you live where you live? And what makes you thrive? And those are the same kinds of questions that we can ask of nature when we encounter it. Like, why does this leaf have this particular shape? What is its function? Those are some of the kind of the questions that just tap into, I think, innate curiosity, so that there's not pressure to have an answer. I think that's one of the most profound things that we can do, is not have an expectation that we're going outside because we want you to retain this information because there are answers here. And remember this. I think it's explore this, ask questions of this. What can you learn from this?
I'm going to limit to one answer because we have another question, and we'll cap it at that for the next week.
So I'm in natural capital, and I just wanted to ask a question. I've noticed that area is getting financialized quite a bit, and it's sort of becoming a term for marketing and greenwashing as well. And I'm trying to do authentic things in it, but just curious, because obviously policy drives a lot of subsidies, right? And there's winners picked, and we see this with, the IRA legislation, that sort of thing. And so what I'm wondering is, and then what happens is, a profitable investment sometimes gets crowded out because of government policy, throwing a bunch of money at things. So my question is, how can you do this? How can you support nature-based approaches, either with policy or the private sector? And the simple answer is, PPPs. But how can you actually do it so that, it's profitable, but it's also, nature first? So I'm just kind of asking like a policy question, a nature first question. How do you do this, the money and the nature together, like you were mentioning?
I would say two things. One, honesty about the system that is being used and full disclosure of, if you will, the rules. Secondly, measurement and quantification where possible. I think that so much could be done with computer modeling that is totally, perhaps, totally made up. And so we believe quantification and full disclosure, honesty takes us a long ways down that discussion.
Thank you so much. I'm going to cap it now. I do want to remind everybody in the room too to please engage with the panelists that you see before you today that you've heard on the EarthX app. You can connect with all of them via the app. And I'll just ask you all to give us a round of applause for our wonderful panelists today.